born in the mid-1970s, I showed up right when the arcade scene exploded with hit after hit of memorable classics. Just as I was starting to understand what a video game was and how to play it, I was privy to perhaps the best of what the golden era of arcade releases offered. Back then, there were no bad games because everything was a new experience and an epic in its own right. There was nothing like seeing a coin-op as a kid. The sights, the sounds, learning its gameplay, and even watching other people play was a joy. This time period shaped me in so many ways for decades to come. Even now, walking into a good arcade can still send shivers down my spine as I take in the classics that never seem to get old. I have so many memories of this era that I could talk about it all day, but for this episode, we are gonna go over some of my absolute favorites of the early to mid 1980s. We've got some great stuff from Nintendo, Sega, Atari, and Namco, and I'm confident you are gonna love this trip down memory lane. I've got over a dozen games for you, so let's get started. There's no better place to start than with 1981's Donkey Kong. Developed by Nintendo, it was one of their biggest hits back then, a project worked on by famed designers Shigeru Miyamoto and Gunpei Yokoi. The appeal here was instant and your purpose undeniable: save the lady that had been kidnapped by the giant gorilla. It was a story as old as entertainment media itself. Most games back then were incredibly simple, yet Donkey Kong gave you free reign to go anywhere in the playfield you wanted, jumping and climbing along the way. It was essentially a platform game before anyone knew what the hell a platform game was. It also featured a number of different stages, with each one having a vastly different layout and obstacles for you to contend with. The characters would eventually go on to become stars for many more of Nintendo's games, and become household names. Everything about it is timeless, right down to the iconic sounds you hear. Love Nintendo or hate 'em, you can't deny this one was a pioneer that set the stage for countless copycats. Also in 1981, we got Konami's Frogger, a single-screen action game that gave you the task of guiding a frog across a busy street and a dangerous river. Everything can kill you here. Cars, trucks, water, alligators, snakes, and there's even a timer to worry about. That's what made this one so gripping. From the moment you take control, you aren't safe anywhere on the screen for long. Movement was life, and it only got more intense the further you got in the game. This was one of the first games I saw a Sega logo on because they handled the distribution in the US. One of the best things about this game for me was that it really was easy to pick up and play in the early levels. It didn't overwhelm you or take your credits immediately, giving you a first stage that, while dangerous, was still very playable. For 6-year-old me, that was a major selling point, and I couldn't wait to play the home conversion on the Atari 2600. Namco's Galaga was another 1981 release, one of the earliest shoot-'em-ups I can remember playing. The goal was to shoot down squadrons of enemy ships without being blown out of space yourself. Ships would come out in different formations and attack you, while some could even steal your ship with a tractor beam. Get that ship back and you get double the firepower. This one was almost always at the local 7-Eleven or movie theaters back then. It was so common even the convenience store near me had one for years. It was a follow-up to Namco's 1979 release of Galaxian, but this update includes better color, more robust sound, and improved sprite detail. Midway handled the release in the United States, and like other games in this episode, it was ported home to many consoles over the years. I really enjoyed playing it, but I have to admit I wasn't very good at it. The difficulty ramped up quickly and I was overwhelmed just a few stages in. I loved it so much it didn't stop me from trying. Kangaroo was a 1982 arcade game by Sun Electronics, or for those of you unfamiliar, the developer also known as Sunsoft. This took numerous cues from Nintendo's Donkey Kong, right down to the rescue mission and monkey bad guys. You are a mother kangaroo trying to rescue her baby, but those damn monkeys keep throwing apples at you. You had the ability to duck, jump, and punch, and you needed all three to make your way across the 4 available stages. Atari handled the game in the United States, and while not nearly as popular as Donkey Kong, it was really easy to appreciate its similarities. It was a simple time for sure, but a core memory that still brings a smile to my face. Moon Patrol showed up in 1982 as well, courtesy of Irem and Williams, who handled the US distribution. This is a horizontally scrolling shooter that has to be the first time my eyes ever saw multiple layers of parallax scrolling. Your job is to fight your way across the moon's surface in your rover, avoiding enemies and obstacles. You can fire forward and up, and you have the ability to jump. It was a real treat visually at its release and gave you a very satisfying sense of movement and playing in a much larger environment than you were typically accustomed to. I didn't really see this one all that often back then, but when I found it, I always wanted to play it. Pac-Man had been huge in 1981, but it was 1982's Miss Pac-Man that had set my world ablaze. This game was everywhere. There wasn't a laundromat, convenience store, pool hall, bar, or grocery store that didn't have one at some point in time back then. It was absolutely impossible to miss it, and that meant I was always trying to play it. It's essentially an upgrade to the original Namco developed Pac-Man, but this one was handled by Midway, who wanted to capitalize on the original game's large female audience. It has some new AI patterns, new colors, intermissions, sounds, and stage layouts. Though Pac-Man was really popular back then, it was this that seemed to take over permanently. It was one of my dad's favorite games, and likely the main reason I ended up with an Atari 2600 way back when. Everything I loved about Nintendo's Donkey Kong made its way into 1982's Popeye, also a Nintendo release. Olive Oil has gone and got herself kidnapped, and you have to avoid Brutus, a sea hag, a buzzard, and a bunch of other things being thrown at you to get her back. As you move around the stage, you need to pick up the things she is throwing down to you. Hearts on the first stage, musical notes on the second, and letters on the third. As you may have guessed, you can score some spinach to power up, which gives you the temporary power to kick everything's ass. Although this one took much inspiration from Donkey Kong, I love that the bad guy actually comes after you and chases you around the stage. It made Brutus feel more menacing and added a layer of challenge that really separated it. It got crazy hard really fast, especially after the first cycle of stages, but I still remember loving every minute of it. Technically, Sega Zaxxon here was released in 1981 in Japan, but the United States didn't get it until 1982. This isometric shooter was something else back then, because you had never seen anything like it, or at least not at this level. I wanted to be good at this game so badly, but it had so much going on. The altitude of your ship is constantly needing adjustment to deal with the obstacles. Your fuel depletes fast and can only be refilled shooting oil drums, and enemies are everywhere. That made playing this one always tough, always filled with disappointing deaths, and always walking away filled with rage. But boy was it an attraction. Before this game, graphics had been so flat, but this added 3D space to everything, making it feel more complex and substantial. I got a lot better at it as I got older, but I don't mind telling you in those early days, I was in it all for the graphics. While we're on the subject of graphically impressive arcade games, I would be remiss to not mention 1983's Star Wars. This used vector-based visuals for what was at the time a tour de force in arcade experiences. It was developed by Atari and puts you in the role of Luke Skywalker as he pilots an X-Wing fighter in a first-person viewpoint. Seeing this made all other games at the time pale in comparison. The TIE fighters looked so cool flying around you. The trench run genuinely looked like it was in 3D. It also had some of the coolest sound samples and voice work I had ever heard in a video game. the kind of extras that nailed the immersion and improved the experience. The flight yoke and sticks used to aim your weapons and move your ship were icing on the cake. Sadly, no console back then had any hope of bringing this beauty home intact, and we'd have to wait a while for a home version to do it justice. 1983's Dragon's Lair wasn't the first Laserdisc game ever released, but it's definitely one of those games you never forgot the first time you saw it. It was a collaboration between Advanced Microcomputer Systems and animator Don Bluth, and is the first full-motion video game I ever personally laid eyes on. It's also one of the very first arcade games I could just stand and watch the attract screen loop over and over because the visuals were so impressive. It genuinely was a cartoon you could control and guide the outcome. The gameplay was just a series of quick-time events that boiled down to hitting the right button or direction at the right time. I was always awful at this and died really fast, but I still wanted to try. That wasn't an easy thing, however. If you heard the stories that these machines failed often, you'd be correct, because the arcade that had it near me always had an out of order sign on it. Even when it was working, it was the rare game back then that was 50 cents to play, which often left me watching it instead of playing it. 1984 saw a sharp downturn in arcade profits in the United States, but that was also the year we got the very first Punch-Out game from Nintendo. This was one of the earliest fighting games I can remember, and it's another one that has such potent graphics appeal. It was colorful, the characters were huge, and the detail was well above your average arcade release. I really dug the gameplay as well, a mix of timing and memorization that made each fight feel special, almost like you had figured out some kind of puzzle. It used a 2-monitor display that had the action on the bottom screen and the fight card on the upper screen, which kind of added a TV-style presentation, especially with the digitized speech it employed. The control layout was a bit awkward at first because I always felt the punch buttons were too far up on the panel, but this became less an issue as I got older. Later releases in the series improved the gameplay and visuals, but this one still holds a special place with me. Back then, I was quickly learning that when it came to the name Nintendo, quality almost always followed. 1984 was also the year we received Irem's Kung Fu Master. At the time, martial arts movies were all the rage. Every kid I knew loved Bruce Lee, and Chuck Norris was kicking everybody's behind on HBO. Seeing this game was like a dream come true. Every kid's desire put to electronic reality. The beat-em-up gameplay had you assaulting a 5-level temple to rescue your girlfriend from the evil Mr. X. As you made your way across the different levels of the temple, you'll face adversaries like snakes, dragons, exploding balls, and humans that can grab you and even throw knives. Each floor has a boss encounter with a powerful enemy that must be defeated to move on. It has no doubt inspired numerous games thanks to its side-scrolling action and one-on-one boss fights. I love this one for its content, of course, but I also thought it looked and sounded great with its large detailed sprites and boisterous sound effects. It was known as Spartan X in Japan, and the Nintendo Entertainment System got a heck of a version of it in 1985. We end our list by stopping at 1985's Hang On by Sega. Turbo had been released in 1981 and pushed the idea of a 3D racing game to new heights. Namco's Pole Position was another success story in the racing genre that showed up in 1982. Though both had been popular and contributed heavily to the genre, I always felt they were a bit twitchy in the gameplay department, despite their advances elsewhere. When Yu Suzuki dropped Hang On in 1985, he single-handedly redefined what a racing game could be for me. Here you needed to hit timed checkpoints in one long series of interconnected tracks. It had an awesome sit-down unit that you controlled by leaning into the turns, and the sound and visuals were incredible. It became the blueprint for nearly every racing game that followed it, and helped shape the direction of the racing genre for years to come. Hell, along with the likes of Space Harrier and Outrun, it helped the entire US arcade industry grow and recover after the 1984 downturn. There we go guys, a bunch of classic arcade games that I have a lot of memories of. The release dates I gave you here are for informational purposes only, and not necessarily when I first played them. Some of these wouldn't be accessible to me until a few years later, and some for only a very short amount of time. Still, it's amazing to look back and see how these games influenced the industry at large, and ultimately, how I viewed it. While Sega had a number of important games during this stretch, I didn't really start to appreciate their offerings until their superscalers began to show up in 1985. That jump in visual and gameplay complexity started an entirely new era of gaming for me, leaving the single screens and simple mechanics of earlier titles behind. But you never forget where you came from or how you got started, and these were some of the games that made those early days an unforgettable time in my life. It's also important to note that much like the home console business, the progression of the arcade industry was quite different region to region. In North America, we saw a massive slowdown in the arcade business in 1984 that saw revenue slashed in half. This didn't happen in Japan, where that business model would remain healthy for another 2 decades. Honestly, I felt lucky just being there and being a part of such a special time. I will always hold those memories close, and I'll never forget them. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.